what stood out to you more than anything in this year's NFL draft?
I think the biggest thing is the league is desperate for quarterbacks, right? I mean, we knew there were the big three of Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jane Daniels. We expect those guys to go 1, 2, 3. But I don't think really anyone had Michael Penix Jr. going 8th overall to the Falcons, and then Bo Nix follows him not too long after to the Broncos. So I think most consensus thought had those two guys somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd round. But obviously a couple teams felt much differently about those guys. Even if you have a solid veteran bridge quarterback, like the Falcons do, you got to go and find your guy for the future. And they took a big swing, and I don't know if that went over too well with the general public, but if he's their guy and they really think he's going to be a good one, then go for it. And so I think the league seeing a dearth of quality quarterback play is the biggest thing, and they're willing to take some swings to go get some.
So would you have done those decisions if you were the Falcons and the Broncos in those situations? Obviously, the Falcons, we heard that they didn't tell Kirk Cousins allegedly, so that made it look even worse. And the Broncos with Bo Nix, a lot of people thought were going to fall in the 2nd round. Would you have done that if you were the GMs of those teams?
I personally would not have. I would have been more than comfortable taking one of the blue chip players on the board at number 8 and, waiting to get a Spencer Rattler later on in the draft, like the Saints did in the 5th round. And the same for Nix. I didn't personally feel like those two guys were that high on my board, but obviously the teams felt differently. And as long as they actually felt like those guys were good enough to go that high, and they weren't just reaching for positional value there, then I can't really blame them for taking that swing. And only time will tell, how effective those selections were.
The tight end position has really grown in the NFL, changed everything, opened up different doors for so many players. Travis Kelce being one of them, George Kittle, Laporta. Sam Laporta is going to be a star for many, many years to come. I think he's the up-and-coming, big-time tight end in the NFL after what he did last year, especially in the playoffs with the Lions. When you look at this year's draft, everybody was speaking about Brock, how great he is, that he could have been drafted in the top 10. I was so happy that the Jets did not draft him at 10, but he fell to the Raiders, and I didn't understand this after drafting Maye last year in the 2nd round. It didn't make any sense. Now you have 2 tight ends, 2 elite tight ends that could turn out to be good, and it did work with the New England Patriots. Do you believe this is going to work with no quarterback?
Well, the quarterback is that's the key in this whole thing. As far as fit goes, I thought Bowers was a really, really talented player. If you're drafting him and you're expecting him to play the prototypical tight end role, I think you're going to be disappointed because that's just not the guy he is. He doesn't have the size or the blocking ability to be that. But if you're looking at him and saying, okay, this is a guy who presents a really unique skill set and is a matchup nightmare for not only linebackers but defensive backs as well, and you can use him in a bunch of different ways. Use him essentially, he can line up outside. He can play the big slot. You can use him in line, run him out of the backfield on different routes. There's a lot of different ways you can utilize this guy. And I think if you have an offensive coordinator who you can sit down to pre-draft, like hopefully the Raiders were able to do, and say, hey, what is your vision for this guy? And he can instantly tell you and say, all right, I know what I want to do with this guy. I know how I can use him. Then I think Bowers can be a really effective player. And then Maye over there, he was a really good prospect coming out of Notre Dame. He's definitely more of your prototypical inline guy. So I think they have two prospects there who balance each other out with a skill set. And I think it's just going to depend on the scheme and how they can best make use of those guys' talents.
So we were talking about earlier with Marvin Harrison. He was suing Fanatics and the distractions with his father so far. Arizona taking him in number 4 and already seeing a lot of this off the field drama,
which I predicted, by the way.
Would you have done it with the talent that he is? He's the best receiver prospect allegedly since Julio Jones, or would you have gone a different direction with somebody like Malik Neighbors?
I would have just taken Harrison. I got to watch him for 3 years being a Buckeyes fan, so I know firsthand the type of talent he is. He's a sensational player. there are some distractions there. You know, we'll see what kind of things that develops into. Right now, it's some weird things, you know, that players didn't really have to deal with, you know, a few years back before the NIL revolution. So we'll see what ends up coming out of this situation with Harrison. But I think once the season rolls around, like he did at Ohio State, he's going to bear down and focus and prove that he was worth that selection.